Hey, what's up, everybody? Rath here with another version of Rath's Learning Curve tonight here on rotocurve.com. I'm your host, Michael Rathburn. You find me on Twitter at FantasyWrath. We're going to break down some Week 4 NFL cash game lineups. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the lineup construction. I'm going to give you some insight as to where I think these lineups went wrong, where I think they went right, and hopefully you can put some of this in play for Week 5 NFL. We're recording the video on Thursday night, coming into the Sunday slate. So we're going to be able to go over all that. Before we jump into this, I do want to mention, please, if you're not already a member at rotocurve.com, please go to rotocurve.com, sign up for free, get a free account, and have all access to our content, our videos, our forums, our chat room, our learning tools, our statistics. Everything we offer is free and geared towards helping you become a daily fantasy winner in DFS. And I can't say enough good things about everybody that we have on staff, the videos, the content, everything. Again, free content, rotocurve.com. Go ahead, sign up for a free membership. It'll be well worth your while. Let's jump into this exercise. Again, something brand new that I'm trying out here. Kind of one of the things I was thinking about is how do we teach during the season? Well, let's look at what we did last week, where we went right, where we went wrong, and how can we improve on moving forward for this week. Let's take a look. Okay, guys. Well, so we got some user-submitted lineups here. So we got Thomas had submitted his DraftKings lineup. We see here he put up a 133, and he did finish in the money. One of the things I like about what Thomas did is he played a $2 50-50, and he played it Thursday through Monday. So, that's good because you have potential of over-ownership in the Thursday game, and you can exploit that. So good job by Thomas. It's something I've mentioned in a forum post and in videos. Scoop those cash games on DraftKings in Thursday because it's definitely going to be some opportunity to win some money. Overexposure on that game, and that's something that you can definitely take advantage of. So let's talk about the lineup. He did win, but I think there's opportunities to point out where there's potential, possible, mistakes and ways that you can improve, and then talk about the things that were done right. First thing, quarterback, Derek Carr. Did like the price on Derek Carr, but I didn't love the matchup. On the road was a situation where it's a non-conference road game for the Raiders with a game coming up against the Denver Broncos this week. I felt like the Raiders were going to come in very flat for this game, and that's why I really wasn't on them as much. A lot of people were loading up on Derek Carr, Murray Cooper, and Latavius Murray. I loved Murray because as a running back, there just wasn't a lot of guys that you could lock in 20 carries with. I felt like Murray was one of them. But I really wasn't a fan of Carr and Cooper last week. So, the situation was I didn't like the matchup on the road, and also look ahead to the game against Denver. I felt like they were going to be focused on that game, may come in a little bit flat. The running back combo of Devonta Freeman and Carlos Williams struck gold. Carlos Williams could have had a bigger game. He really didn't get going. But here, 92% owned, so really not that big a deal. In cash games, we're not worried about ownership. We want value and floor. We want to get the best value for the guys that are going to get the most opportunities, whether it's carries, targets, etc. So I love the running back situation. Don't necessarily love the wide receiver situation. I think you got to be very careful when you're spending up at the wide receiver position in cash games because the position is variant. What that means is it's very subjective in game script flow in the terms of it's really hard to find a cheap wide receiver where you can get a lot of value. It's much easier to find that at the running back position. People get hurt because of contact. Other players step in. And a lot of times it's all about opportunity. If Julio Jones goes down this week, it doesn't necessarily mean that Roddy White's going to mimic that production and match that production. Roddy White's an older player. He's been struggling. It may end up being a guy like Leonard Hankerson, or the targets may get spread around, whereas with a running back, all the carries are probably going to go to the next man up. So that's just something you got to bear in mind is that it's a lot easier to find value at the running back position. Instead of so you're going to want to spend up at the wide receiver position, but you want to make sure you do it with the right guys in the right spot. As far as the Packers go, look, Randall Cobb was on the road, and they played Monday night, and now they go on the road, and they play San Francisco on Sunday. I didn't like the spot on the short week on a road. I felt like, they would have come in a little bit flat. Again, big, heavy road favorite. Were they in a position where they were going to stomp San Francisco, or were they going to come in and kind of sleepwalk through the game? So I did not have a lot of Green Bay Packers or Oakland Raiders last week. So I wasn't high on Randall Cobb. I thought you had to overpay to get him. And I thought he was more of a tournament play if they happen to go off. Kind of, again, one of the things you don't want to do in a cash game, this is one of my rules. Again, everybody has different rules for cash games. So one of the things I don't like doing is pairing up players. I don't like pairing quarterback, wide receiver. We see here we got actually a triple stack of Carr, Cooper, and Murray. The problem is you have 33% of your lineup tied into one team. That is very high risk, because if the game does not go according to where you project it, it's going to put you in a very bad spot. Now, having a Devonta Freeman and a Charles Clay definitely can make up those mistakes, but again, you can't count on those every week. So one of the things here is just be very careful in using more than one player on a given team. I really don't like using more than two players in a given game, or even I don't really like using two players in a game, but if the value and the matchup dictates it, I don't have a problem with it. Look, if you use Latavius Murray and Martellus Bennett last week, there's no issues with that. But just be aware that you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. We talked a lot about that in baseball. It certainly applies here in football. Charles Clay at tight end, gotta love the value there. One of the risks that you have with taking Charles Clay is you also taking Carlos Williams. So you're kind of splitting, the upside there. Again, we want individual events in cash games. We want to try to, we have 9 players. I try to get as many different games as I can. Sometimes you can't do it because of bye weeks, because of matchups, injuries, etc. So in this situation, because Williams and Clay were so cheap and the wide receiver for Buffalo is out, it does make sense that you want to go with Clay. Again, I probably would have tried to get Bennett in here, but Bennett would have been a situation where you would have had 4 players owned from the same game, and that's not something you want to do either. So good job on the Charles Clay pick like that. And the Latavius Murray pick, I like it. The problem is you had already paired the quarterback and the wide receiver, so it made it high risk. I probably would have jumped off the quarterback and the wide receiver and would have went with maybe an Andy Dalton and then try to pick up maybe a Keenan Allen. Those are kind of the guys I was on. The Cardinals defense didn't come through, but I can't kill that pick. They were at home. They were against a poor offense, and they were playing pretty hot. Denver was the defense I was heavily on for cash games. The price was right, and I like the matchup. But, again, the Cardinals were in a tough spot. It's a division game. Sometimes those don't necessarily work out. But, again, I can't kill the pick. The biggest thing here is be careful about spending up at wide receiver in cash games. Be careful about pairing up too many guys from the same team in the same game. Those are things that you want to be aware of. But, again, good job by Thomas here being on Freeman and Clay. Those plays end up – you can make some mistakes in cash games and have a couple guys go off and still win. That's the beauty of it. But, the job here is to put yourself in a better position to win every week. This is Brett Mosier's lineup that he submitted from DraftKings. Went with the value quarterback at Tyrod Taylor, so I like that play. I didn't use Taylor in cash last week, but I can understand why you would. When you get a running quarterback, the floors become easy. If they have a bad passing day, they can always make it up with their legs. So that's something that you always want to take into consideration. I love Jamal Charles last week, and in that situation, you knew they were going to rely on him heavily in that offense. On the road at Cincinnati, expected some points in that game, and it did come through. He had Carlos Williams, who was the value play of the week at running back. Don't like the wide receiver situation here. Again, the Randall Cobb, Amari Cooper plays I did not like last week. And he has Larry Fitzgerald, who was a hot player against a tough defense. And the problem is, the reason I didn't like Arizona last week is they were going against the Rams and that Rams pass rush, and Carson Palmer likes to throw deep. Bruce Arians likes to throw deep. And when they went against that Rams pass rush, it just wasn't going to allow them to throw deep. So they had to adjust their game plan. And you saw the game get slowed down quite a bit. The Rams were able to control the game with Gurley on the ground. So it wasn't really an optimal matchup for Larry Fitzgerald last week. So that's, again, that's something that you want to keep an eye on. Greg Olson was a good play, I think, going into Sunday morning. When the weather situation came out, we saw that the weather was really, really bad. I think that was an opportunity where you want to jump off Olson and go with another tight end. Lance Dunbar got hurt. I like the pick in cash game, especially, at that price point, heavily involved in the offense, especially with the 1-point PPR. So I had no problem with that play. It just was bad luck. And the Broncos D was at home, and they were favored against a pretty bad offensive team in Minnesota. So the mistakes here were all pretty much at the wide receiver position. This lineup came close, I'm sure. It might have cashed in some stuff. I'm not sure what the situation was. But again, you got to make sure that your wide receivers are in optimal situations. And neither one of these wide receivers really was in a good spot, in my opinion. I know hindsight's 20/20, but I was not on all three of these guys at all. This is Adam's DraftKings lineup that he submitted. Again, the Derek Carr play, the value quarterback on the road. We talked about that situation, how we didn't particularly like it. Had the Devonta Freeman, Carlos Williams pairing at running back, which was good. Put up a monster score, 156.94, so I got to like that. Had the Cobb Cooper combo. Again, we talked about that. Love the fact that he had DeAndre Hopkins. He was pretty much my number one cash game wide receiver last week. I had him everywhere. Really, it came down to this. Even if Arian Foster were to play, I wasn't worried. DeAndre was going to get his share of targets. He was covered. The only week that he really didn't get his coverage, his targets, was the one who was playing Carolina, and he was covered by Josh Norman. So DeAndre is going to get fed. And with Houston being down, you knew they were going to have to throw. And that was going to be a situation where DeAndre was really the only option they had to throw to. So, again, he came up with 9 catches. He had the 100-yard bonus. He had 157 yards receiving, so he paid off great. Jordan Reed was not a good play last week because the Eagles are very tough against a tight end. A lot of people blindly picked Jordan Reed last week because they saw the number of targets that he was getting. You have to consider what a team does against a position, and not just this year, but go back and see what they did last year. If they have been elite against a particular position last year and this year, you don't want to go against that, especially in a cash game. Matt Forte in the flex, I like it. He put his most expensive player in the flex position in case something were to happen. He can pivot and have a lot of options. There was no issues with Forte, but just, again, good practice there. And Forte is a pretty good floor guy on a site like DraftKings because of 1-point PPR, and his price was really, really attractive. And you felt like this was going to be a close game, so he wasn't going to get games scripted out. So great job picking up Matt Forte here. I like the 3 running back philosophy in cash games. I typically go 4 wide receivers in tournaments because I want the upside. But in cash, I'm definitely looking to play 3 running backs. I want as many touches as possible, and I want that floor. I'm not worried about upside. And love the Broncos D at home. That number could have been a lot bigger if Peyton Manning didn't throw 2 picks. Here's Adam's FanDuel lineup. Not as good. And definitely, there's some situations here that we can take a look at. Love the Andy Dalton play. Kind of at FanDuel, it's really easy. What I'm looking at is I have to get 2 times my salary, and I want to get what I call a 2X at minimum. So with Andy Dalton at 7.6, I got to get 15, 16 minimum, but really with a quarterback, you're looking at 18 to 20 minimum as far as your floor goes. So he did hit that. You had a quarterback that was at home, that was favored, that was underpriced. So he hit all the trifecta there. Carlos Williams at running back, he nailed that pick. That was the best pick of the week. Don't like the Eddie Lacy pick. He took a running back on the road. Yes, it was a heavy favorite, but it was in a situation where the running back was still kind of coming off an injury and on a short week. And in this situation, spending up and spending 7.8 on Lacy, really, really needed some touchdowns here in order for this thing to pay off. And when I got to rely on touchdowns to have my guy pay off, I got to look at that guy as more of a tournament play than I can a cash game play. Again, when you're talking about running backs, you really want to try to get guys at great value that are going to get 20 touches and hopefully be involved in the passing game a little bit, because if a guy gets 60 yards rushing and no touchdowns and he leaves you with a 6, it doesn't do you any good. But if he can get 40 yards in the receiving game and pick up 4 catches, now all of a sudden he's at a 12 and he puts you in a much better spot. So it's tough to take a guy like Eddie Lacy to me in cash. because at this time he wasn't healthy. He was on the road on a short week, and he's not really catching the ball in the offense. Talked about my feelings about Amari Cooper. My feelings on DeAndre Hopkins. I love the play. Like what he did here, spending between 7,000 and 8,000 on the wide receivers. The problem is the Emmanuel Sanders pick. Emmanuel Sanders has no ability right now to put up. This offense is not scoring points. They're kicking field goals, and that's a tough spot. And so really at this point, it's really tough to take anybody on the Denver offense outside the kicker and the defense. So the Emmanuel Sanders pick is tough. He's got to get to around 16. In order for him to get 16 on a half-point PPR, we got to get a touchdown. So if he doesn't get a touchdown, 16 is basically, I got to get around 10 catches for 100 yards. That's 15. So he wasn't going to do that. So let's say we got Emmanuel Sanders at 8. Let's say he goes 8 for 80. That's still only putting him at 12, and I'm not hitting value. I got to get the touchdown. It's going to put him at 18. Just not something I can bank on in this particular spot. We have a projected game total of around 43. So I did not like Sanders in this spot. I think he just could not rely on the touchdown, and that's really what you needed. The Jordan Reed pick, I didn't like it last week at all. The Eagles were tough on the tight end, and you had to pay a little bit more for him too. He's at 5,600. It wasn't like he was super cheap. Love Matt Bryant at home. He just ended up kicking a lot of extra points, and love the Denver defense at home last week. That's a great spot. Home favorite, low total, gets a lot of sacks, going against an offense that's not really that great in Minnesota. Here's a lineup from Eric Rasmussen on FanDuel. Again, you got another popular pick with Derek Carr. Didn't really pay off. Need a little bit more upside in your quarterback, and I didn't like the matchup. Like the Jamal Charles and the Carlos Williams. Love Jamal Charles because, again, he's involved in the passing game, heavy percentage of the offense. The wide receiver is similar. The Amari Cooper, Larry Fitzgerald, Randall Cobb. Seems like there was so many people that were on this group, and I didn't think all of them were not really an optimal matchup. So, definitely lesson learned is all three of these guys were coming off of super hot weeks. But just because they had a hot week and they were good price doesn't mean that's what they're going to do the following weeks. You have to look at every week independently and not fall into that trap. Don't like the pairing of the quarterback and the wide receiver in this spot. That's something that's an issue. We have Cobb and Crosby from the same game. Don't like the kicker with the wide receiver pairing. Also, we have Martellus Bennett, who was a great play, but now we've got 3 players tied up into Oakland, Chicago, which is not something that we want to do. Again, like the Denver defense, but, we see some issues here. The quarterback wide receiver pairing was an issue. 3 players from the same game is a potential issue. And then the wide receiver and the kicker, to me, that's not really what you want to do. So let's jump over to FanDuel. This is the actual lineup that I put in last week. My cash game lineup on FanDuel put up 111. That was able to win about 95% of the contest. Wasn't a high-scoring week, so 111 came through. And let's go through my lineup. Look, we got Cam Newton at 8.3. The way I look at it, I was looking for 20 out of Cam. The bad weather kind of put a damper on that situation, but he had a bad passing day, but he had a great running day, so he was able to kind of salvage and get me 16. So, while it wasn't great, it didn't kill me. Latavius Murray, love the value. I thought he was going to get a heavy workload, which he did. The problem is he just didn't run for very many yards, so that, he didn't get a touchdown. He didn't blow up. Carlos Williams, the price was so cheap. At 6.3, getting a 14.5 is not bad. He came through. Keenan Allen at home in a high-scoring game, projected high total. They were favored. Antonio Gates was out. San Diego's offensive line was in shambles. That meant they were going to have to throw the ball, and Keenan Allen was going to be the number 1 target. That's how I looked at it. He was a perfect cash game play for me at 7.7, and he hit the floor at 15.2. DeAndre Hopkins was my number 1 cash game wide receiver last week at 7.9. He hit his value at 20 and got you a little bit more than that. James Jones, I didn't love James Jones last week, but I love 6,000, and he kind of hit value at 12. He got you a 2.2x, so didn't have a problem with that. Again, I wasn't in love with James Jones. Travis Kelce, I did like Martellus Bennett, but I was trying to only have one player from the Oakland-Chicago game. And so that's one of the reasons why I did not have Bennett, and that was a mistake. But Kelsey did have 5.4. You know, he didn't really go to him all that much. He didn't get a touchdown. I did think that was going to be a high-scoring game, and Kansas City was going to have to throw coming off the short week on Monday night. And that kind of was the case. It's just that they didn't really go to him all that much. I paired McManus and Denver D, and I felt like it was going to be a close, lower-scoring game. I thought Denver would be ahead a little bit more than what they were. McManus at home is pretty much gold at this point. You know, in the Denver altitude, he's always going to get opportunities to kick 50-yard field goals, so that's something you got to consider. And the way the Denver offense is playing right now, they can't sustain long drives to get touchdowns, so they're kicking field goals, and they're going to win with their defense. That's just how they play right now. Jump over to the other side here with the other team. The other team beat me. It got 115. Now, he paired James Jones and Aaron Rodgers, so to me, that's not something I would do. And he paid up at the quarterback position at 9.2 for a guy on the road coming on a short week, so that's not something I would do, and I didn't do it. He had DeAndre Hopkins, which was good. He did have Larry Fitzgerald, who didn't kill him but didn't produce value. I did not like the matchup there. Great call on Martellus Bennett. He hit the Bennett pick, which is good for him. And then he had a pretty good kicker in Bryant. Only 6, but he was in a really good spot, so I can't kill that. And then the Seattle defense at home, you know, produced a 9. They were at 5.3. Got a little bit better value out of the Denver Broncos at 4.7. So I was able to spend money elsewhere. But again, you know, I really should have went with Bennett last week, and that was a mistake on my part. But again, you can see how this lineup was built, and the guy did a pretty good job. Let's go over to this lineup. This lineup only put up a 91. I think there's some major issues with this lineup. First off, overpaid on the quarterback in not really an optimal situation. I like the Latavius Murray pick. It didn't come through, though. The TJ Yeldon pick is kind of a head-scratcher. He did put up 11.9, but when you're paying 6.4 for a guy that's on the road in a very low-scoring game, and you can get another guy that's at the same price at home in a run-heavy offense that's favored at home, you know, to me, Carlos Williams was the play. So the TJ Yeldon pick, I think the guy got lucky that he got 11.9. Didn't like the pairing with the quarterback. You know, spending a ton of money on Randall Cobb and Aaron Rodgers, to me, that's a tournament strategy. That's not something that you want to do in cash. Dante Moncrief, yeah, he was only 6.3, but he had Matt Hasselbeck throwing the ball. So there was really no upside for Dante Moncrief. And again, you know, a bad game, bad matchup, just didn't like it, and was probably fortunate to get a 10.5. Didn't like the play with Emmanuel Sanders. Again, you see the wide receivers here. You know, this guy put up about 25 points at the wide receiver position, and I put up 52. So about 47. I'm sorry. I put up 47. So you see that was the big difference. You know, I killed him at the wide receiver position. Charles Clay was a great pick. And you got to like that. You know, I love the Clay pick. No Sammy Watkins. And so you knew the offense was probably going to flow through Clay. Took a kicker on the road. Not in love with that play. Not something I normally do. Normally I'm going to take kickers at home. And I'm going to want good offenses. St. Louis, even though they put up 24, is a putrid offense. You know, give me good offenses, good defenses at home, and I'll pay them every time. He took the Denver D, which was good. This lineup, the guy put up 99. Again, Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb, James Jones. So he stacked the Green Bay game. Not an optimal situation that you want to do in cash. Something I would never do because, again, 130 a lineup is tied up into one team. If it goes bad, your team is going to go bad, and you're probably not going to win. You're going to have to get major big-time games out of some other players to cover up all these mistakes. So big mistake here, taking Rodgers, Cobb, and James Jones. Like the Carlos Williams, Latavius Murray. That was good. Don't like the Larry Fitzgerald, and then also the stack. Did good with getting Martellus Bennett and Brandon McManus, and unfortunately Arizona's D didn't come through. I don't blame him for taking Arizona's D. I didn't necessarily like him in the game. I thought it was a bad spot, but I can't fault the play. But they were not one of my top defenses last week. I was pretty much locked in on Denver and Seattle, and also Green Bay. We'll go to this lineup. This lineup put up an 86.84 on FanDuel. Love the Andy Dalton pick. He was one of my top cash game quarterbacks. Favorite at home in a high-scoring game and extremely underpriced. Like the Latavius Murray and the Carlos Williams picks. I don't like the wide receivers here. Don't mind the James Jones pick. He did hit value. Again, I was only on James Jones because he was $6,000. I thought that was so cheap I couldn't pass on him. But the Julio Jones and the Larry Fitzgerald picks were tough. When you're paying 9.4 on a wide receiver, you really, really need to have everything line up. The problem that we had with Julio Jones last week is that you have Atlanta at home, favored by 7 in a high total game, and Houston is on the road in a non-conference game, and they've got to play Indianapolis on a short week coming up on Thursday. My guess is Houston didn't game plan for the Falcons at all and just went into the game and they got smoked. So Julio Jones got game scripted out because they were ahead by so many points. So that's something you got to consider. Is I'd rather probably have DeAndre Hopkins, who's a 7-point underdog, and I know he's going to have to get the ball because they're down, versus Julio Jones, who, if their team is going to be up, he's not going to get the ball because they're going to run Devonta Freeman. So that's the risk that you take when you pick an expensive wide receiver, because if we're talking about a 2X player, let's just round it up. We got to get a 20 out of Julio Jones. So in order for me to get a 20, I got to get 100 yards receiving. So let's just play simple math. I got to get 100 yards receiving. So I got to get a 20. So let's say I got to get a touchdown. It's going to put me at 16. I got to get 8 receptions. That's going to put me at 20. I got to get 8, 100, and a touchdown just to cover my nut. And that's just not something that you can bank on week in, week out. Even with a guy like Julio Jones, he's going to have down weeks. It's not that he had a bad game. He just didn't get the targets because the game didn't dictate for him to get the targets. So that's something you got to consider. Again, when you're playing cash games, I really try to look at wide receivers on FanDuel between 7 and 8,000 because I'm looking at trying to get a 15. It's a lot easier for me to get a 15, even if a guy doesn't get a touchdown. If he gets something along the line, so let's say 8 for 120, and he doesn't give me a touchdown, I still know that I'm covering my nut. Whereas if a guy, if he doesn't get it, or if he goes, let's say he goes 4 for 60 and a touchdown, it puts me kind of around that 12, 14 range. It's a lot easier to get a 12 to 15 at a wide receiver. If you're banking on trying to get a 20, it's just not going to happen as consistent, and it's going to put you in a tough spot. The Greg Olsen pick was tough. He looked like it was a great pick coming in, but that weather situation really played havoc in Tampa Bay, and that was something that really affected me with the Cam play. Josh Brown on the road at Buffalo. I know Josh Brown's been a really good value, but I don't like the spot there. I don't like kicking against an elite defense. I know there's some people that love doing it because they think the team's not going to score touchdowns and they're only going to kick field goals. But you got to get the opportunity. And if you're not getting the opportunity, it doesn't really make sense regardless of how you think it's going to play out. And the guy did have the Denver D. Look at this lineup, 124.66. So this guy put up a really good score. He did have Aaron Rodgers, who did not hit value, but he did have Devonta Freeman, and that can cover up a lot of mistakes. Carlos Williams, did hit. The Cobb pairing I didn't like. Jordan Matthews, I don't think that pick made a lot of sense in cash because the Philadelphia offense has struggled so much. And then you got the Amari Cooper, who we've already talked about, and Jordan Reed. Don't like the pairing of the wide receiver and the quarterback. I don't like the Jordan Matthews and Jordan Reed from the same game. That to me is a little bit too risky. Again, but we talked about why Reed was a bad play. Philadelphia is elite against the tight end. Love the Hawker pick, super cheap at 4,500 at home in a dome in a high-scoring game. So great job on the kicker there. And the Carolina D was a good, solid play because, again, going against a weak quarterback in Jameis Winston, Carolina was able to really take advantage of the situation. So good score here again. But the wide receiver position, you can see how critical it is in cash games to nail these wide receivers. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the cash game reviews on the lineups. Hopefully, we gave you some good insight this week. And look, let's try and do maybe a preview coming into week 5 and maybe get some lineup submissions from some players on rotocurve.com. And we can review those lineups and kind of tell you where we think you can improve and where maybe you made some mistakes or where you did good and can kind of keep that flow going. All right, guys, that's going to be it. We're going to wrap it up. Again, check out rotocurve.com. Sign up for a free account. Thanks again, guys.